Good day, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We have a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you experience any technical difficulties joining the WebEx session, please dial 1-866-779-3239, or you can message the WebEx producer using the Q&A panel. During the presentation, all participants will remain in listen-only mode. As a reminder, this event is being recorded for rebroadcast. We encourage you to submit written questions at any time during the presentation using the Q&A panel located at the bottom right of your screen. After typing your questions in the space at the bottom, hit the send button, and please be sure to direct your questions to all panelists in the drop-down menu. Your questions will not be seen by other members of the audience and will be addressed, time permitting, towards the end of the session. Now, I'm pleased to turn the call over to your host today, Adam Storch. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Marcos. I appreciate it, and thanks everybody for joining us on this somewhat snowy northeastern day. And for those of you in the Northeast, you're used to a snowy day. What I'm going to do is give you an overview of our corporate legal solution. I'm going to do a little bit of a slide piece. I promise not too many. A couple of slides, sort of set the pieces, as well as do some live work for you, so some live action solution piece, as well as, of course, answer any questions at the end. Okay. Hope you guys can all see my slide well. The first one, it says corporate legal solution from MicroStrategies, which is where I, of course, am from. MicroStrategies has been around for a little over 30 years. We're a systems integrator, and I've been with MicroStrategies for almost 10 years. So let's dive into our corporate legal solution. All right, top 6 challenges. Now, when we say top 6 challenges, we're talking about the top 6 challenges we've heard from people in terms of dealing with the corporate legal side. One of the big ones is incoming contract review requests. What does that mean? That means the idea that the corporate legal department is dealing with a lot of documents that need to be reviewed, people sending them in, saying, you know, can you look at this NDA, can you look at this contract, can you look at this piece, you know, I need an NDA or I need a contract, but dealing with a lot of those incoming requests is a big deal. So we'll touch a little bit about how we handle that incoming request situation. Managing the contract review process, as well as renewals. When we talk about that, we're talking about the idea that says, I need to manage the workflow about having something reviewed, approved, that whole negotiation process, and then afterwards, the idea of renewals. So we've got to have a date on that the next time we have to look at it, follow-ups, if you will.
Adam, my apologies. It looks like some attendees are having trouble seeing the slides. Why don't we go ahead and reshare your desktop so we can
sure.
That ability. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There we go. I'll go to share. Okay. All right. Can people see my?
Yes, I can.
All right. So I will go to that next slide, and everybody can see my slides now. Marcos, seems we good?
Yep.
All right, great.
Go ahead and proceed.
So, excellent, thank you. So we were talking about the top 6 challenges. That's a slide you see here. Hopefully from an audio perspective, we touched on the incoming contract review requests. That's the idea that says managing all those incoming reviews. Then we're going to talk about the managing the process, the workflow process. So we'll touch a little bit about on that, how we handle the idea of the review and approval of all the different contract requests coming in, as well as renewals. The idea that says, hey, after so much time period, year, 2 years, whatever, how do we handle that renewal process, okay? Then we'll talk about maintaining and providing contract templates. Now, the idea here is, remember, this is all sitting on top of Alfresco's Alfresco 1 document management platform. So you've got a full feature-rich document management solution there that gives us the ability to have a portal for people to go in and get their documents. You can be able to share documents, share templates, and so forth. So we'll touch a little bit on the portal aspect of being able to review documents and share those documents. We'll also talk about comparing versions, creating red lines, okay? Because at the end of the day, we are basically editing documents and going back and forth. So we're going to touch base on the idea of doing comparisons, doing some diffs, if you will, creating those red lines. The tool that we actually integrate this solution with is called Workshare, okay? I'm sure you guys are familiar with Workshare. You know, if you're familiar with it from a long time, go back to Delta View. So we'll also show you that integration between Alfresco and Workshare. All right, and then we'll do a little bit on searching whether it's documents or versions. Obviously, another important thing is being able to find these things. So we talk about, you know, bringing them in. We talk about reviewing and approving. We should probably talk about searching documents as well. So we'll touch a little bit on searching, both from a more quick search kind of perspective as well as more of an advanced search. All right, and we'll talk about working with incoming emails. So as we talked about earlier, a lot of stuff coming in, all right, there's different ways for documents to come in, could be some emails, so we're going to talk about how to deal with incoming emails, getting those into the repository and allowing users to be able to quickly store them, access them, and do what they need to do with the incoming emails as well. So again, when we talk about the top 6 challenges, it's from various conversations and experience we've had on our side, but it's wrapped around things coming in, things going through a process, being able to work with those documents, being able to find those documents. So what I'd like to do now, continuing down the road here, let's talk about the incoming process, all right, the documents coming in. Now, what we've seen is basically a need to go off and control that incoming request process. And the idea is what we've had is users from their systems or their company's intranet, okay, an intranet portal, if you will, be able to have a link that says, I would like to request a document to be reviewed. So this is the triggering mechanism, right? This is how we get the ball rolling. This link to a form, example form you see in front of you on my screen, is a link to a form that allows them to capture the appropriate information to go off and start that review process. So I, as a user, would go to my intranet and I would click on Contract Review Request. When I clicked on that particular link, a form such as this might show up, okay, and the user would be able to fill that form out and attach the appropriate documents they want reviewed or request documents they need, okay, to start the ball rolling. And this kind of link, we've had this link hang off of a regular portal. We've had it hang off of SharePoint. We've had it hang off of a LifeRay portal. So depending on what exactly you guys have in terms of being able to trigger the process, that's where this link would be. And basically, you have some requester information. You would have some vendor information in this instance, okay, some contract information, as well as, of course, contract terms. All right, and then attachments. And the idea here being you want to be able to, in this instance, say, hey, legal department, need you to look at these documents, need these things reviewed, if you will, in this example. All right, now what's nice is after they've added those attachments, okay, they click the submit button down there at the bottom. When they hit that submit button, what happens is the 2 documents, 3 documents, 1 document, whatever they've, you know, requested to be reviewed, all right, as well as all that information is automatically uploaded into the repository. So remember, from a user's perspective, filled out a form, maybe is involved in this, maybe a little less, but I filled out a form, attach some documents, and hit submit. Now, by doing that, what happens is it automatically, in the document repository, builds out a standard folder structure. Now, this is an example, okay? I will tell you every client sort of has their own flavor for what that folder structure needs to look like, and that can be based on the request being done or specific, you know, to a department or what have you. But a standard set of folders is automatically created, okay, as well as a unique ID for that request. So you see up at the top where you've got that LCR 2014 number, right? That's your unique identifier generated for this request. It builds the folder structure, work product, supporting documents, executed documents, and correspondence. So it builds out that folder structure. What it also does is see that information in that form, okay, all that information is now searchable metadata, okay? So they enter that information for a reason. It could be to help with the workflow process, or it could be to actually just search later on. So all that information you entered, whatever it happens to be on that form, now becomes assigned to this request and becomes searchable. The other piece it does is it also builds a security policy, because obviously, depending on the type of documents having reviewed, you're going to want some form of security on these. So what happens next is it will automatically build out, okay, the appropriate security policy, so only the right people can see the document. Now, all these things you see here are all done consistently, which is nice, because of course when we're doing, document management solutions, one of the main reasons people do it is to maintain standards, right? You want the same, look and feel. So every time a new request comes in, perhaps it looks the exact same folder structure like you have here, or a request of a certain document, or a master agreement or a vendor review form or something. But based on that type of document, you want a certain folder. We want to maintain those standards, as well as, of course, the security. All right, so if something comes in, perhaps, a contract for HR, that could be some hiring information. Maybe that one becomes more secretive, if you will, or more secure. So you want a certain security policy attached to that. All right, so again, keeping in mind, I've filled out some information as a regular user. Okay, I've submitted my piece. It automatically builds out that folder structure, assigns a unique identifier, all right, and then from there, it goes off and assigns the security. Once that's done, it will automatically select, okay, and create and execute the workflow. Now, the reason I say select is the workflow that might be used might be different based on the type of document we're reviewing, okay? And for those of you who don't know, Alfresco does have a built-in workflow engine called Activity, pretty robust engine. We'll touch a little bit more on it in the live piece of the demo, but it will automatically select and execute that workflow. So whether it's the recipients and the rules and all the other stuff, that's all addressed by virtue of either A, the workflow template, and the data that we entered in that form. Okay, so from here, I've actually filled out my form, I've created my folder structure, all the pieces, I've selected my workflow, started my workflow, and of course, notified people that they've got something to do. All right, so the idea here is I've built my workflow and I've told people, sent them links, because obviously, people are not going to actually live in the document management 24/7. So the idea behind the notifications is their ability to go off and click on that to know they have something to do, whether that's reviewing the document, asking questions, working with the vendor, or what have you. But those notifications are automatically sent out. And then once that workflow is done, the document is stored and tracked for renewals or what have you. All right, so this request process, the key things we want to take away from this is a form to be filled out, very simple, okay? We've got clients that have forms with like 7 or 8 pieces on it. We've got forms this complex, really depends on the needs, but they fill out that form, they attach their documents, hit submit, and we build a standard structure, so they've got a nice solid way of storing the documents, allowing them to search, allowing them to be able to have the appropriate security, having that unique identifier, and then automatically kicking off that workflow. So now they've got something to review, and they can track that entire process, because again, Alfresco has that built-in activity workflow that allows us to do parallel workflows and all sorts of interesting things, which again, we'll touch base on in a little bit. All right, so that's sort of your intake process. Take away from that, the key things is standardization and of course ease of use, because you don't have to worry about users building all those pieces. It happens just by hitting submit. Now, let's talk about locating things quickly. All right, what you're looking at here is what we call a site in Alfresco. A site is a container. It's a vendor contract management site. In this particular site, what you're looking at is the ability to do a search, because when somebody logs in, we want to make it easy for them to go off and find that particular request that they're looking for. Here, they can enter the vendor name. So when I've entered Tivana, as you can see right here, and by virtue of entering that, it comes back and says to me, okay, Adam, these are all of the vendors that start with that Tivana, and these are the contracts that we're dealing with, okay? So you want to make it really easy for people to get access to these documents. You don't want them rooting around. So you can navigate. You absolutely can click and navigate through to be able to find the document. But here's a nice example of a quick search. Being able to log in. I log into Alfresco. I simply go to my lookup search. I type in as much as I know about the vendor or whatever, because I will tell you in different solutions, those fields are different. So in this example, you see vendor name and contract name and status, a lot of different pieces. Part of, implementing this solution is understanding what are those key variables that people are looking for. So sometimes this is contract, sometimes it's vendor, sometimes it's customer, sometimes they actually use the numbers themselves. So we've got clients that actually work with the contract request ID, the one I showed you earlier that's automatically created. A lot of people know that. When we deal with, when we deal with people who come from law firms, they remember matter IDs, for those of you on the legal side, which is still amazing how people remember all these matter IDs. But so from a search perspective, I've got a vendor name here. Could be a review ID that they remember, okay? So based on your needs, based on what you have to do, is how we would configure this search piece. The key takeaway is the ability that as soon as they log in, be able to have a quick search piece like this to enable to get them to where they want to be. So they can click on that vendor name and go to that vendor folder where all of those requests are located, or they can click on the actual contract request, okay, and be able to get access to those documents, okay, be that the ones that they've loaded as part of the process or ones that have been loaded during the workflow process. So this is, again, a nice way of quickly getting to those documents that we've stored as part of that, intake process, as well as documents that have been added over the life of the process. Okay, now let's touch a little about editing, all right? There is this whole concept, as we talked about, editing documents, be they Word documents, Excel, or PowerPoint. What you can do, as you can see from here, is you can actually access these documents right from within Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Adobe. So in other words, you've got that nice interface, the web interface, the browser piece I showed you a few moments ago, again, which we'll show live in a bit. But you can also live in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and be able to open from Alfresco and save to Alfresco, all right? So for those people who have no intention of getting, leaving their Office applications, there is a way of being able to access those documents. And when we talk about that, you can get to the recent documents. As you can see here, you can also go and get searching, so you can search for documents based on certain properties or metadata of the document. What's also nice is if you've got favorite folders because you're working on something. For those of you, again, if I may jump into the legal side of the old law firm thing, my matters kind of concept, all right? So if you've got favorite folders, those might appear there as well, and you'd be able to go to the favorite folders to be able to access those documents. So what's nice is you can search on a folder name, you've got the favorites, you can search, see recent documents, all without leaving Office. And again, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Now, what you'll also notice in this print screen, you see a Word icon, you see a PowerPoint icon, you see a PDF and an Excel icon. That's there by design, okay? As you guys know, if you try to open up a PowerPoint document from inside Word, it's not a pretty picture, okay? Same with Excel and so forth. The difference is with this integration, okay, you as a user, if you get to a certain folder, all right, by virtue of it's a project folder, it's a contract folder, it's a what have you, but whatever reason you get there, and the document you're looking for happens to be a PowerPoint document, yet you came in through Word, not a big deal, you would select that PowerPoint document, hit open, and it would actually fire up PowerPoint. All right, so we do that because we don't want people to have to worry about going to a centralized interface if they want to stay desktop, right? It's good enough for them where it's like, I'm in Word, if I can open up my other documents, my Excel, my PowerPoint, my PDFs, that's great. Okay, so we give them that ability by virtue of this plugin. So you've got the central document management repository with the security and the versioning and the whole 9 yards, and you're able to stay inside of your Office application, okay? Is your folder structure. Now, the other thing we want to talk about really quick, at least in the slide perspective, is previous versions. So this is the idea that says I'm working with a document and I want to look at a couple of different versions. Now, what's nice is what we'll do today is we'll show you a little bit of the comparison piece wrapped around using Workshare. And that would be, again, for those who've been doing it for a while, the old Delta View stuff. But this is the idea of comparing two versions, all right? So I can select a document, I can select two versions, and I can hit compare, and I can go off and do that comparison. Some clients have some sort of comparison tool, so we'll capitalize on that, hence the Workshare piece. Others do not, so we'll use the word compare. So it really depends on what exactly people are using in terms of that comparison process, all right? But what's important is from within this screen, while I can do the comparisons, as you can see by selecting a couple of versions, I can also go off and I can open that version. I can revert to a previous version. So revert, for those of you who are not familiar, is I can turn on select a version, hit the revert button, and what will happen is it'll make that version the latest version. Okay, so again, all the types of features you'd expect to have, in a robust repository, robust document management system. All right, but with how we're doing this through the Office integration piece, or through the Office applications. Because again, some people are great with the web, and some people would rather stay in their Office piece. So we give them all those capabilities, all those functions, if you will, right from there. Okay. All right, other features really quick as we end on the PowerPoint side of it. Okay, I know you guys are really excited about PowerPoint. Advanced search, you can search on all the properties that are in that intake form, as we talked about. You can drag and drop documents right into the repository. All right, the templating we talked about as well. Some places will go off, and what we'll do is, as part of that request, okay, a templated document comes along. So because they requested something specific, instead of submitting documents, all right, for review, they'll actually request documents, and it'll grab a template to make that part of the workflow process. Okay, so it really depends, again, on where your, what your objective is. Is it to get documents reviewed in that intake form, or is it to just start a review process, but add a document automatically that solves that question, whether, in that form they say, I need an NDA, so it goes off and assigns and attaches that NDA for the workflow process. All right, saving emails and documents, we're going to talk about that and go through that in a sec. Track, if you will, who's working on what. This really depends on, how you guys want to do the tracking. Some places are more focused on just making sure they know who's got what, right, who's working on what piece. Other places are a little more focused on sort of load balancing, if you will, in the sense that how many contracts is that person doing versus that person, and I want to be able to change who's working on what. So that really depends on how your organization is set up. And of course, from a renewal perspective, okay, the idea here is, remember how I had that form initially, right? We filled that form out. Perhaps one of the fields in that form, depending on where you are in the process, could be the renewal date. Now, sometimes you know at the beginning, sometimes not, all right? You can enter it there or you enter it later, but the key is, if there is a renewal date there, what can happen is when that renewal date happens, or review date, because a lot of times you're not really kicking off on the renewal date. It'll be like, minus 30, so much time before the renewal, all right? But it'll automatically kick off a workflow. So the same concept of the workflow on that initiation process when you filled out the form, that same workflow process can happen based on the renewal situation, based on whether it's the review date or the renewal date. You can kick off a workflow, all right? And we'll touch a little bit about the rules concept, as well. Obviously, the concept of digital signatures is in play as well, depending on how you guys work. There's, digital signature integrations into CoSign and DocuSign. So as part of that workflow process, okay, you can have that document go out for signature, and the out could be another person within your organization. That could be the out, or out could be out to the external vendor, all right, where they would go off and be able to do the signature, all right? So depending on what your company's policies and so forth are, digital signatures can play a role in the solution, again, internally or externally, all right? And of course, there's always the conversation that talks about the migration strategy. So the idea is, I've got a bunch of documents, and I want to be able to, migrate those documents into the system, okay? So we're going to do a little bit of a demonstration here. I'm going to demonstrate the intake piece, going to demonstrate some searching, the Outlook integration, as well as some Office integration. So let's do that now. Okay. All right. So now I'm hoping you guys can see my my Outlook screen, and I've got some emails here. Okay, down the side here, what I've got, remember we're talking about sites. Sites are those containers, right? So sites are basically those places where we're going to store documents. Here's an example, all right, of a bunch of folders, all right, where I can put stuff, okay? I can also search the repository. So I'm going to, which I've obviously done before, I'm going to type in Tempest here from a search perspective, and I'm going to search for folders there. And here is my Tempest folder right here where I want to store something. So I click on that, and I can from here access that folder, all right? Or I can navigate, You know, I can open up, I'll open up everything, show you. I can navigate the whole thing. And I show both because, you know, depending on what you're looking for, you might want to be able to search or you might want to be able to open. Same folder, as you can see, all right? Now here, as I go across, you'll see different CR numbers. These are those request IDs, right? So I've got, for this one, you know, special, all right? I've got different folders. So when this particular situation, when that form was filled out, it built a folder, okay, the main one for that request number, or that request ID from that initial diagram we talked about. It built these subfolders, correspondence, executed, you know, supporting and working and so forth. These are all folders that exist for this request, all right? And what I can do is I can take my document here, my email I should say, and I can drag that over into my correspondence folder, okay? And what it will do is it'll put that correspondence in there, all right, and it's in there with its information, special companies, the message, and of course the document itself. So I can leave my correspondence in there, and the idea is when something comes in, I can just drag it in there for storage purposes. Now this next part really depends on how you want to work. From here, I can open up the document if I want, I can do stuff. What I'd like to really do is, here's that document that came in, going to double click on it, all right, and when I double click on it, it opens up Word, all right, so here is Word. And I can do some, you know, editing and all sorts of other stuff like we talked about. I can add new information just for the sake of putting something new in there, okay? But I can do edits to my document. And once I've done that, I can hit File, Save to Alfresco, all right? And now I'm presented with that interface you saw the print screens of, right? And the different ways to access a document. I'm going to type in Tempest, because that's that folder I was doing. And I can put this particular document here. Now, depending on the situation, right, so here's that special one I was working with. Depending on the situation, I can go off and store it in my working folder right here, all right? I can store it supporting, executed, or what have you. Here's that correspondence folder we did before. Now, the idea is here's the document that's already in the system, right? So this is the one that is already in there, because remember, this came in via email. So I, slow down a little, I apologize. Email came in from a document because I had sent it out for request, so please, outside concern, take a look at this. They emailed back their copy. I dragged that email into the repository, into the correspondence folder, so it sits there if I want the correspondence. I then opened the document, all right, looking at it now, and I want to save the document that came back in as the latest version of this document, okay? So I want to save as the latest version, so I can hit save, all right? And I'll make this a major version from client. Okay, and I hit OK, and it will save the document as that latest version. Okay, document saved. Okay, now I can go also back in, File, Open from Alfresco. All right, I can look at recent documents. Okay, as you see this list here, this is a list of the last 20 documents that I've been working on. All right, so here's my documents here. What's nice is if I take a look at these two, I think we may use this one. Let's take a look at both here. So I click on this, I hit previous versions. All right, here's that one I just did. Okay, here let me do this one here. I think this one's got a bunch in there. It's got the one. We'll save a couple in. Save this. All right. So here's a bunch of versions. All right, so this is a nice one. So if I grab this one and let's say this version, you notice that compare pops up, all right? And this is that piece we were talking about earlier. Remember the comparison of the two versions, all right? We've got some clients that actually have this compare thing that works on two different documents as opposed to versions. The reason that might change based on your needs would depend on how you want to use the system. Some people are okay with the version tree, such as this, where they've got the idea that as new documents come in, they version them. Other clients turn and say, no, Adam, I don't want to version, I don't want to mix the version tree between external and internal. I want my internal documents to have its version tree and the stuff that comes to the client to have its version tree. So it depends on how you work. But the idea here is I'm comparing two versions, and when I hit the compare button, what it does is it fires up Workshare automatically and runs the comparison. All right, so it'll automatically compare the documents, okay, run through its process, okay, and then present you, okay, with your document, basically the comparison of the two. Now, depending on how you want to work, you can go off and take this document that we've done a comparison on, and you can leaf through it. Workshare is very powerful tool to do the word comparison. You can work with this if you like, do your accepting and changing and all that other stuff. Or if you want, you can go off, I hit review, and I can make a track changes copy. So depending on who you're working with, sometimes they're very good about, leaving track changes on and going back and forth. Other places, not so much. They'll just go send you a Word document and, make you go figure all that stuff out. The idea here is you can hit that convert piece, and it'll take that document or those two documents and create a red line for you. So then you've got that red line version of those two documents, all right? And then from there, you can take the red line version, which is what you see in front of you, and I can save that back into the repository as well, all right? So from here, I can save this document right back in as a new version, okay? Go back, save to Alfresco. All right, and we can save the document right back in the repository. So again, I think you guys get the idea, but want to give you that flavor for working in and out. You've also got the concept of comments. All right, so the idea here is I want to have that ability to comment on the document. Now, these are comments that are not attached physically to the document. These are attached, if you will, as information as terms like metadata, if you will. So when we talk about metadata searching, like this example, doc name, title, description. These comments are similar where you have actually a dialogue back and forth with somebody on a given document. So if they're in the website of the client, if you will, so they work with the website, they can have comments, or they can have comments based on the document here. But the idea is they can have that dialogue, if you will, going back and forth. Okay, so again, in this kind of interface, as you see the save to Alfresco, open from Alfresco, it's Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, okay, as well as Adobe. So you've got that same look and feel, searching and all that other stuff. So just in the interest of time, because I know we got a lot of people going on, so let me go over here. So I'm going to click on this link right here, and what this will take us to is that form. So remember that form we talked about earlier where I said we filled it out? I'm just going to fill one out, real quick and show you some of the process pieces on the website. So requester name, we'll say Adam Storch, and my email, type that in. Okay, and the counterparty, we'll use our friends at Tempest, so Tempest Enterprises, see a little type ahead there. Representative, we'll use Mitch Bohr. All right, and again, the type of information, the amount of information in this form really depends on you guys. It also depends on how much you want to have in there that is required, right? Because some people want to have a whole bunch of information to kick off whatever that process is, the request, okay, or the review, okay? But in this instance, we'll just do legal support. In this instance, we're going to ask for, a lot of information. And remember, what's nice is all this information we're talking about is searchable, okay? So in other words, every piece of this data that we're entering here can be used to find this later on, okay? Now, these drop-downs and so forth, without diving, too deep, these drop-downs are managed inside Alfresco and controlled by users. So users can go up and manage some of these drop-down lists. So business group, human resources, applications, and this is for everyone. In this example, we're talking about here, you've got the idea of selecting that legal reviewer, group, or myself. Purpose, we will say save the world, okay? And in this instance, again, we're going to attach or upload a couple of documents for review. So I'm going to select a couple of documents, and these can be from my desktop, okay? And I'll select an exhibit. And again, this is to get the ball rolling in terms of getting these documents reviewed, all right? And I hit submit. All right, now I've submitted my documents for review. The job here is done. Remember, what did I do? I went off and I said, basically, let me go off and access that document. I'm going to get that document in there for review so people can go off and do what they need to do, all right? Go off and get us our Alfresco dashboard. So here's our dashboard. Now, if we look at this, I'm going to hit rewind. All right. Now this, okay, is an Alfresco dashboard. It's the user's dashboard, myself, of course, because it says Adam Storch right here, all right? When I log in, this is the first thing I see. It tells me some tasks I've got to worry about, work going on and so forth. These are sites, okay, my documents, my activities, okay? These workflows here that you see here are ones that have been started. The one we just did, as you remember, is this one. Okay, Tempest Enterprise Legal Support. Now, want to show you a couple of things real quick. I'm going to click on this button to view, and the reason for viewing this task is I want to give you a flavor for what this workflow looks like. All right, when we talk about, again, workflow in the world of Alfresco, you can be as simple or as interesting as you like. In this example, you see this workflow's got parallel tasks. So in this, you can go to Legal Review or you go to Process Manager. You've got the idea of decision tasks. These are what I call exclusive gateways, which really just means based on information that's been entered, it goes here or it goes here. So you have rules on where it goes. Loop backs, in other words, you can go back and forth several times between people. You'll notice this is a person icon. This is a person icon as well. This is a little gear. The reason the gear is relevant is because this is a gatekeeper validation app. What it's saying right here is I am not going to go to this next step, Execution Manager, unless certain information is done or the legal review has been taken care of, okay? So the idea is you can have these gatekeeper pieces or process pieces that will ensure that it doesn't go to the next step unless certain things are taken care of, all right? As we travel down, you'll see this gear here. This gear means another certain process is going on. In some workflows we've done, this process actually turns around and updates another system. So if you look at other companies we've worked with, sometimes, this process turns around and says the contract is signed, it's approved, you may now trade with this person, or you may now do business with this vendor. They're now an approved vendor, if you will, okay? So the idea here is you want to be able to allow the person to work in their process, but other systems may need to get updated by virtue of what's going on here. So what this process could do is upload, or I should say, communicate with that other system and say, hey, this particular process is done by virtue of being successfully completed. You can now, again, work with that vendor or work with that client. So from a workflow perspective, you've got a lot of, powerful capabilities here. Some people's workflow are not this interesting. Some are pretty basic, where it just goes 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps. Some are like this, and believe it or not, some are even more involved, okay? So from the standpoint of what you can do, just keep in mind that from a workflow perspective, you've got a pretty robust engine sitting back there for you to work with, okay? If we travel down, if you remember, when we said we filled out that form initially, remember it built this folder, okay? So if I click on this folder, click on this link, it'll take me to the folder. Here was that folder that was automatically created, okay, today, basically at 1:36, okay? And this is the one we built, and as we talked about earlier, as we travel down the side, all right, this is all that information that was entered, all right? So all that information is there for us to be able to search on, okay? And that's the other piece to keep in mind. You've got all this other data, okay, that's available, all right, to be searched on, all right? Remember, we didn't re-enter anything. What did we do? We went off, we filled out the form, and we started that process, and that's how we got there, all right? If I click on the form, or I click on the folder, I should say, I get to my other folders here, all right? These are those ones that we did just now. If I open up, say, the supporting documents folder, there's a document, the document we entered as an exhibit, okay? If I open up the other folder, which was the working documents, okay, here's that document we entered here as well, all right? If I click on this document, I'm able to go off and see the information about that document as well, all right? So again, it inherited all of that information, okay? So I could search on that document by that information. If I scroll down a little farther, you see, remember when I filled out that blue form, right, initially, okay, I selected what it was. It was a master services agreement. That came across as well. Obviously, this is specific to the document, right? So these are document properties, hence that document type, whereas the other pieces of information are more geared towards the process. And I'm sure what you also noticed is by clicking on the document, what's nice is I get a preview right here. And I can actually go through the different pages and look at the document, read the document, okay? I can actually put comments on the document. Remember, we talked about that idea of commenting, right? So what's really nice is you can comment on the document itself, which you see here, or comment on the entire request. All right, so depending on the dialogues you want to have, it could be on this document or it could be on the entire request. But commenting, nice feature, and again, it can be commenting on different levels. All right, I'm going to click on our folder again, bring us back to here. All right, now you saw me go into the Word piece where we save documents in via Word. That was very nice. One of the piece, I want to show you real quick is if I open up here, I'm going to go to my C and I'm going to go to my demo files. So here's a bunch of documents on my local box, okay? Another way of getting files in there is you can actually drag and drop right into the repository. All right, so just to let you guys know, it's a matter of, yes, you could be in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and save it in that way, like you saw me do, or you could just simply drag and drop. And what's nice about the dragging and dropping, I hit OK, all right, here's that document I just did. When I click on that document, all right, I am able, or it will automatically go off and assign all of that metadata, okay? And then if I want to add the doc type metadata, okay, I can add that as well by hitting Edit Metadata. But the nice part is I can drag and drop the document right into the repository, and it'll inherit those pieces, all right? Taking us back to our folder piece. And just, I'll click on Template Enterprise, all right? And that special one, remember that one I was working with the emails? If I click on that in correspondence, okay? Here's that correspondence we dragged in. All right, so it tells me about, here's the attachment. You see it's encompassed within the email, because depending on how you're working, some people want that correspondence tracked, if you will, or saved for use later and for proof. This is exactly what came in. So as you can see, it's an EML. It's an actual message. So I can open this and forward it on to whatever that next step happens to be, okay? And I've got the attachment embedded right here. Okay, so I've got the, what came in as well as working with it individually, okay, individually inside that working documents piece. Okay, see, this is what we did 13 minutes ago. That's an edit we did. So remember, when we were in Word, we opened, saved the document, and that's what we did, right here. Okay. Now, we also touched base, if you remember, on the searching. So let me touch base on that. Site dashboard. All right, and I'll close this. Now here is my vendor search right here. I can go off and I can type in TEMPEST, all right? And here's my Tempest, and I'll go off and hit search folders, and this is that search we talked about earlier. Remember where I showed you the print screens. So right from my site dashboard, I can quickly and easily be able to go off and access, okay, those documents. So from a searching perspective, it's very easy to go off and get access to those documents. And as we talked about earlier, I can click on this, the vendor name, okay, and it'll take me that vendor list of documents or the request itself. So if I want to do the request that we just did, which is the legal support one, I can click on that, and up pops that folder. And here's all the documents and folders wrapped around that, okay? So that gives you also a flavor for that whole, the whole searching piece. Now, one of the things we touched on, I'll just do it relatively quick. I just want to touch on the security aspects. Okay, as we talked about, there is security wrapped around this. Down to the document level, we basically use security policies, all right? And the idea is I can go off and manage those security policies. Every time one is created, one meaning a request, the security policies are automatically created, the base policies, all right? So this is in progress, this is locked. If I click on in progress, I can control who's in that group. And of course, this security piece is governed by who has the appropriate rights, okay? So not the whole world cannot go off and access these documents. The idea is we have these policies and the appropriate people can manage those policies. So you can take that policy, add groups, add users and so forth, and manage those policies. And those policies can be reused, if you will, across the system. So in other words, you're not necessarily assigning security individually to each document and changing each document. You can create that security policy that's automatically assigned to that document, to that request that you did. So remember, if I go back, we'll go all the way back to you a little bit more, go to my dashboard, right? And I go to the one I just created, all right? Here's my legal enterprise piece. And from here, I'll just click on that folder. So I clicked on my task, I'm clicking on my folder, all right? And then from here, I can manage my security. So this is the idea that says I've got that security policy. If I've got the appropriate rights, I can control what policy is attached, all right? So depending on what your needs are, again, security can be managed very easily, okay? So that gives you, like I said, trying to touch base on a lot of different pieces there, you know, in terms of what the system can do as we sort of fade back to the PowerPoint that we worked with. Again, you know, trying to hit those top key pieces. You know, we touched on the Outlook integration, which is very nice, you know, the dragging and dropping, bringing those documents in. All right. We talked about the idea of being able to, you know, import the documents, bring them in via that structured process. Because remember, structure, very important. You want to make sure there's consistency in terms of how you're working with those documents and how you're working with those requests. So we talked about that as well. We talked about the Office integration stuff, remember, where we talked about the ability to go off and get access to the documents from within the Office applications as well as the searching. So I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point in time. Okay, I had one question about integration. Basically, from an integration perspective, when we talk about integrating, say, you know, this part of the system, whether it's the Office piece right here, or integrating with the workflow process, I will say a lot of times there's other systems that exist in the repository, or I should say in the enterprise, that we would need to talk with. And, you know, basically, when we're dealing with contracts, sometimes there's a vendor management system, if you will, like an Oracle Financials or an SAP or something like that. And a lot of times for the information that's in there, we want to validate what the user selected or entered with that information, meaning with the information in another system. So what will end up happening is we would go off and access that information from that other system. So if I go into Alfresco dashboard, when we talk about the metadata and the properties wrapped around that, there'll be some integration back and forth, you know, into that system to be able to, you know, access that information and validate the information there. Okay. Any other questions? Going through the questions now. We've got a couple more questions. One of the questions is in reference to that Office integration, the part I showed you guys with Open from Alfresco. That is something that MicroStrategy's created. It's a separate tool, if you will, a plugin, very light on the desktop, mostly on the server side, but that's something that MicroStrategy's created that allows you to open from and save to Alfresco, okay? Without that tool, you still can work with, you still can get to the access to the repository. In that case, you'd be more navigating to the documents as opposed to searching. The objective behind building what we built with the plugin was to allow you to do the searching, the recent documents, and the favorites, okay? So yeah, the Open from Alfresco is something custom that we put together. When we're talking about, looks like another question is around the custom metadata, okay? So the custom metadata or properties are usually defined as part of the requirements, if you will, the initial review of what you're trying to do. So what will happen is we'll work with the client to define that custom metadata and then configure the screens accordingly. And what I mean by configure the screens accordingly is sometimes that metadata, the custom properties and so forth, sometimes they're text fields, sometimes they're from drop-down lists, and sometimes they're coming from other systems, okay? So in terms of the custom fields, we work with the client to do that. Some clients do it themselves, okay? But a lot of times we'll work with them to define the appropriate information, either from that form, remember that intake form, working with understanding what needs to be gathered from an intake form, as well as other data that may also need to be added to that document after the form is created, all right? But we work with you guys, and then, of course, again, based on whether it's a free form field or a drop-down or a lookup, we would do the appropriate configuration. And then some clients, quite frankly, they handle the configurations themselves. So it really depends on your level of IT capabilities on your side. Somebody just asked about sharing the webinar. The webinar will be available. It will be available outside, so no worries about that. I think that covers the questions. I want to make sure I don't, So one person asked about the tool that you used to create the customized search in Alfresco. So that is a custom dashlet we put together, sort of a framework that we have. So it's a, without getting too technical, it's a combination of Java and JavaScript. But it's a custom dashlet that allows the user to search based on their fields. And what happens is, that dashlet would be different based on what each client has, because based on their fields or properties would depend on what this would look like. Different clients have different custom fields. So I've got one question wrapped around assigning reviewers. I'm hoping I get this question right, about how do you assign those reviewers. Basically, there is a whole piece around either using the rules engine. So there's a rules engine that you could turn around and say, by virtue of certain information, right, that is stored in the document or part of the document, it will go off and allow you to say, if this field equals this, send it to Adam versus send it to somebody else. So you can use a rules engine to assign who gets it next, or depending on what you're working with, those may be functional roles or groups, right? So sometimes in those different tasks, you'll assign groups to those tasks, pooled, if you will, and then they'll go off and be able to set up the, access those queues, and by virtue of accessing those queues, okay, they will be able to work on those documents. I got a very good question now, and she's not going to like the answer. So I got a question about doing the compare with Word without Workshare. The way it works, the way the integration works, is if it finds Workshare, it will use Workshare. Okay. So happy to show you what happens. We have to do probably another demo where I uninstall, if you will, Workshare and show you the Word compare. So because what happens is with that Office integration, when you're doing that Office integration piece, what it will do is it will go off and, let me open up the document, it will go off and check. All right, when I open this up and hit open from Alfresco or save to Alfresco, it will check to see if you have that integration installed, and if you do, it will go off and give you the compare. If you don't, it'll use Word. But happy to give you a demo. Please feel free to reach out to us. We'll give you a demo with a desktop that does not have Workshare installed, and you can see how it would work that way. So, it is something we can show you. Any other questions? I know we're coming up to the hour. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. I know everybody's very busy, and I do appreciate you guys spending some time with us. Okay, I guess, Marcos, it looks like we've answered all the exciting questions. Of course, I'm liberal with the word exciting, but I think we've answered all the questions at this point in time.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation today. Ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude our webinar for today. Thanks for attending.